Welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast, where we dive into practical leadership insights that are, well, obvious. Your hosts have walked the talk, and now they're sharing their knowledge, strategies, and advice. Let's jump into today's episode and explore the world of leadership with your hosts, Joey and Omar.
Nice background, brother. I'm gonna have to upgrade mine soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's just a plant we've had in the family for about 20 years. Not
Right? Is it real?
It's real right there.
Man. All right. Well, let's kick off today's episode. Hey guys, welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast. I'm Omar.
I'm Joey.
And welcome to our spot where we like to lead with purpose and
achieve with clarity.
There we go.
Yes, sir. Yes,
so
sir.
Teamwork, guys. Teamwork. So today's episode, we want to kind of do a little bit different. We want to talk about a couple of different topics, specifically communication when it comes to you as a leader, when you communicate to be able to delegate to your team, and then communicating goals and what that should look like from a leader standpoint, as well as from the employee standpoint. All right. So without further ado.
Yeah, man. So I think also in that point, man, I think it also needs to be about how that message gets to the middle manager, right? So ultimately, that will determine how you as a leader will basically communicate to your employees, right? If you get this as a, I hate to say it, but a goal without any kind of background, like any kind of like how we're going to get there. I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes that message is translated the same way to employees, and they're kind of like stuck in the wind, like, how do we do this? Let's go do it, but how do we do it? And
you're giving a high level, and you're not helping break it down to what their part in the actual plan is going to be, right? So for instance, if your goal is to get 20 new accounts in the next week, what does that look like? Is 20 overachieving? Is it more than what they would hit in a month? Is 20 like on par? Is it an underachieving goal to where we should be at, right?
Well, boss, we only hit 2 last week. How are we going to get to 20 this week?
Exactly. When you're just throwing out a number there without giving them a clear idea as to how you're going to achieve it, if they can't visualize it, it's not going to get done. And there's been countless, studies done on this, even at like a pro athlete level, where if they cannot visualize it, they can't achieve it. But the trick is, if you can help somebody visualize what they're going to achieve, it's similar to them achieving it. So the process becomes a lot easier to go through.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a difference when somebody gives you a goal, right? And somebody tells you, hey, go get this goal. There's a difference between innovation and doing whatever you can at any cost to meet that goal, right? Because I think that leads to an integrity issue.
But Joey, if I tell them how to do it, then why do I need them? I can't even tell you how many times I've come across this. And I'm sorry, guys, if that's you as a leader, that you're not leading your people. You're just throwing it and you're hoping that they're going to stick. Don't get me wrong. You're going to have people that are going to be able to pick up the ball and run with it after some trial and error. But guess what? The majority of people aren't like that. And if you're saying, well, I only want the people on my team that can do that, you don't have a duplicatable system, meaning when you lose those people, because you will lose those people, it is going to be a much harder time to get back up to where you were at, as opposed to actually having a true and tried system to be able to bring somebody on board, communicate not only the goals, but also the process to help train them. This is why communication is crucial. to where you can take somebody who has no background in your industry and be able to train them up efficiently and get them up and going faster than somebody who's been a veteran in that same industry for 20 years.
Man, that's powerful right there, man. I'm telling you. We've talked about frameworks before. Having that great framework to bring somebody in from the outside and get them to perform at mediocre level within a short amount of time. Just imagine where they're going to be if they increase with that 1% a day, like we talked about, right?
But Joey, I'm telling them what to do. It's not my fault they don't listen.
I hear that all the time, man. And I feel like you also have to lead with, you have to take the lead as well as lead others, right? So you have to make sure that you're showing them, hey, through the process, this is how we're going to achieve this. You've said it before, right? As a district manager, you walk in and one of the first things you try to do is help a customer, right? And that's leading by example, right? And I feel like it's a lot easier to follow somebody that is leading by example because they are the epitome of what's supposed to be happening right now. Or hopefully maybe they'll give you feedback and say, hey, we can do it this way. But you got to have that communication so that y'all can talk about what's better for the situation, what's better for, how we're going to get there. Like it just needs to be a two-way street.
Yeah. And if you're thinking like, I am too high up the ladder to be selling on the floor or showcasing the sales behavior. What Joy just mentioned, I actually learned that from a VP of a company I used to work at. That's what they would do as soon as they would walk into a location. It wasn't a matter of like, okay, I'm going to do this. It was, okay, yeah, we're going to step in, we're going to do a visit, but I'm also going to showcase, I'm going to exemplify what I expect. And then we're going to handle the rest of the business. But I'm going to showcase that, hey, I know what I'm talking about at least. And, the behaviors I'm asking of you is also behaviors that I will be doing when I walk into any of these locations. It's not one of those, oh, customers, get them away from me. I am too high up the food chain to be bothered by a customer. Like, that's the wrong kind, especially in the sales environment. If you fancy yourself a sales organization, that is the absolute worst thing as a leader that you can do to showcase. Because what you're showing them is that I don't care about the people walking into the door. They pay, they buy the stuff, but I don't care about them. I have other stuff. I have administrative stuff I need to make sure it gets taken care of. And it's like, you guys got to learn how to delegate. You can interact with that person, get the conversation going, and then be like, hey, Joey, but let me introduce you to so-and-so. I'm sorry, I just had, there's a couple of things I got to handle. Joey's going to go ahead and take care of the rest of the interaction with you. Joey, this is what they're looking at, boom, 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 boom. And that when they see a district, a region, a vice president do something like that, it showcases to those individuals that, okay, maybe my manager isn't talking out of their ass, right? Maybe what they're telling me is actually what everybody is looking for. And they just showcased it in a very quick, simple method, how to be able to do what they have been asking me to do.
Right? Well, so in that same message, right? If you're not putting the customer first, right? What is that telling the employees, the leader of that branch or whatever it is of that store? You're putting the numbers first before the customer, right? If you don't value the person that is walking in that door as your number one priority to take care of them as a person and provide the services that you offer as a company to them, I feel like, the message that is being communicated is that you value the numbers, not the customer.
And don't get us wrong. We're not saying the customer is always right. FYI, for those of you who don't understand this saying, that is not the full saying. That is just what people think. And that's a lot of customers are very misinformed. Let's put it that way when it comes to that saying. The saying is the customer is right only in terms of fashion. Customer comes in and they're wrong. They're wrong. There is no way around it. We don't do business according to how they think we run business. Obviously, we have a business model to run and we go with it. But to Joey's point, when somebody walks in, it's not that we're busy, 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 busy. You don't exist to us. It's let's showcase the right models and get them going and give them the attention. Maybe we're not the ones who are going to be able to, help them, but we can at least sound like, hey, definitely we'll be able to assist you. At the moment, these are the people that'll be able to assist you in that regard. If you just want to go ahead and stand in line, we'll be able to get you, or whatever the case is, right? Or if it's something super simple that yes, we can uncover, don't get me wrong, we can uncover needs. It's part of communication. But if it's something super simple and they really have no other, I'm in a hurry, blah, blah, blah. All right, cool. You can get that done online, right? If it's in a, pay a bill, something super simple, like you don't need to be here. You can process that there. If there's anything else we can help out with, blah, 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 blah. You can go through the run of the mill through that. But part of that casing is you got to showcase the communication skills as a leader, not just to your employees, but just like Joey was talking about, you're going to have leads, you're going to have supervisors, you're going to have assistant managers in the locations. Some of you may not, right? You might be in a 1 in 3 where it's just you and 3 other employees. Okay. But for those that do, you got to make sure that communication runs down and gets filtered properly. Because I know we've all seen those videos where they're playing telephone, whether it's that person who's whispering it to the next person and they got to keep going that message down to like the next 30, 40 people, or they're writing the message on the back and that person in front of them has to figure out what they're trying to write and pass that message forward. When we play a game of telephone without actually inspecting what we expect, we're letting the communication falter. And the only people to blame are not the people at the front line, because they're essentially doing what they've been asked to do. The issue becomes in that mid-range where the communication was either lost or lost in translation, which is typically what happens the most.
Man, so that's I'm telling you, man, that's right on point, man, because I'm a firm believer that corporate has best intentions, right? But how many ears and mouths does that communication need to go through to get to the last person, right? And by that time, it's muddled, right? It turns into, this is a goal of 20 instead of, hey, we're putting the customer first. This is why it's good for the customer, and let's give them what they need, right? It turns into, it is just a goal of 20, right? And that's what it ends up being to the frontline person. And I think that's where the issue is, right? We lose that communication. We lose that initial thought of how we're going to move forward as a company, right? And because it goes through so many hands, that communication goes through so many hands, it loses its effect.
Yeah. And as a leader, right, when you're delegating stuff to your team, the worst thing that you can do is, all right, Joey, you're going to be my assistant manager, right? I get information from corporate, from my regional, whatever the case is. I pass it on to Joey. Hey, Joey, our goal is this. Figure it out. There is no reason, no rhyme, nothing behind it. It's, this is the number, boom. That is what it is. You figure it out. And as a leader who's in charge of the entire ship, that's my fault. If my team doesn't hit that, if Joy doesn't explain the reasoning behind it completely, or at least adequately to be able to help paint the picture to them, it becomes my fault, right? And I can't fault anybody other than myself.
Yeah. So we've talked about communication going from corporate to middle management to frontline employees, right? And we know how important that is, right? But let's talk about the part where you're being successful as a leader. You're hitting, you're firing on all cylinders, right? And you got everything right. And somebody from corporate comes to you and asks you, hey, what are you doing over here? If you can't communicate what you do on a daily basis to make you successful, then it's a fluke, right? If you can't communicate up as well about what are the things that have made you successful in that journey that you've made to get that goal that they set initially, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice as well. So it's great to be able to teach back what you're able to do. And you're only going to be able to do that by finding peers, right? you also need to have a mentor so that you talk to them about and say, hey, look, this is what we've been doing. This is what I think has made me successful. Because sometimes what you think is making you successful may not be actually the thing that is making you successful.
Yep. It could be that small little thing behind it. And here's the thing to what Joey is saying, kind of to add to that. The verbiage used is different as well, right? Because when you're having that communication with your direct supervisor, right? So if you're a store manager with your district, if you're a district with your regional, when somebody from the C-suite comes and gives you a ring, like, hey, Joey, so what have you guys been doing? I've been looking at the numbers. You guys have been doing amazing at this metric. Because that does happen. You do get those calls from corporate, from the C-suite levels, where they're trying to figure out, and they bypass everybody else because, hey, you're there in the front line. So what have you been doing? What can we take back? Can we have you on a call to be able to explain this method so other leaders can also try this at their locations and see what we can do? Can you put this together in a presentation, in a PowerPoint, right? Having that mentorship, being able to communicate with other peers that are at different levels as well, allows you to see, excuse me, it allows you to see kind of where your communication lines are at.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to refine things, right? We all know this. We've all laughed about it. There is a different you at work as there is a different you at home with your friends.
Yeah.
Right. There's different languages that we use, and there's nothing wrong with that. Right.
Yeah.
These are roles that we play at different locations. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You gotta learn how to be able to communicate it in different ways from a high level perspective. Because when your C-suite leadership is giving you a call, they don't want the specifics. They want a high level overview about what you're talking about. So they want something sweet, simple, to the point. Right.
And let me tell you what that doesn't sound like, right? This is not good communication skills. Man, we busted our butts. That's how we got to where we got. Like, that is
exactly.
That is definitely not a overview of how you're successful, right? You have to be, on point with the way that you lead, the things that you do. But like you're saying, you don't want to say, we start off every day with a checklist, and then, and then we do this, and then you're kind of boring them to death, like with the things that you're supposed to do. But what really stuck out to you, right? And I think one of the ways that you're going to identify one of those things is that, keep a journal of those things that you do differently, that you notice, like it's almost like you're observing yourself, right? We talked about observation, right? It's like, wow, like that was a great idea and that worked out well. Let me go write that down real quick, because like how the day goes, right? Yeah, that idea is gonna fly out your head and you're not gonna remember that frame of mind that you were in to notice that thing, right? So you have to reward yourself, make a good comment about yourself so that you can reflect on it later when it comes to communicating what you do that makes you successful.
It is. And it's going to be that, taking a journal, writing down what you have, your framework as to what you're working with, right? Because remember, the frameworks are adaptable. That's the whole reason why you have a framework. Scripts are not a framework. They're a tool in your repertoire to be able to use your framework accordingly, right? And when it comes down to, for instance, what we were talking about, having that high level is going to be something along the lines of, we have this training that we've implemented. It's increased the, offer rate of whatever by X amount, and that's the reason we're hitting this. Cool. Can you delve into that framework or that training on a call, if we can give you 30 minutes or so to be able to do it with your peers in the area that are struggling?
Yeah, well, like I said, man, and you're talking about interpretation, right? And I feel like you can say, if this was one of the things that how you're trying to communicate, hey, we took what y'all gave us and we interpreted it this way. What we found out is that this necessarily didn't work most of the time, doing it this way. So we tried this way, and it has been making us really successful in this one area. And we've been continuing to refine that process so that we continue to be more successful. And that's how we got to where we needed to be, right? And I think that's That's the way that it needs to be communicated, so that you tell them, hey, look, we listened to what you were saying. We just kind of took what you gave to us, the framework that you gave to us, and made it a little bit of our own, and made it successful, ultimately.
Yep. Or not a framework, especially if you're in a smaller organization. It's all right, we need to hit this. We don't know how we're going to hit it. So whoever's got the best plan to move forward with, that's what we want to adopt. Right. And you're going to see that, especially for you guys that are in smaller organizations, whether they're startups or just small companies, right? You're going to see that quite often where the company doesn't necessarily know how to move forward. So they're going to come at you with that high level, hey guys, we need to hit this. And everybody's trying to figure out the best way to move forward so that the company can adopt that going forward, right? And your leadership may not tell you, right? Your district, regional leadership may not tell you. They're going to have something in place because they want to be that person that gets a recognition for having those numbers.
Right.
Because they also understand what that's going to mean for them and their legacy within the organization, right? Their promotion ability, if you want to call it that.
Well, I mean, so let's talk about if you're that person that is saying we need to be here, right? If you're the owner of that business, how do you communicate to somebody without saying this is where we need to be, right? Because there's a difference in just saying, hey, look, this is the goal, guys. This is where we got to be. I want y'all to come at me with, some ideas that y'all have, right? You could do that in the email, most definitely, but I feel like the impact won't be there, right? I think you definitely, if it's a smaller organization, meet in person. There's nothing like a person-to-person meeting, multiple people in a meeting that are putting their minds together, talking about how we're going to put our best foot forward to be successful in hitting that goal.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to kind of like have differentiating opinions here, right? And the reason is sometimes it's not feasible. Small companies could be spread out over several states, right?
True.
So it could be very difficult in that sense. You could do a phone call, you can do email. The best action, though, in all fairness, from experience in the past, has been, all right, cool. Especially if you're doing it from a high level, this is where, and this is what we need to hit. We don't necessarily have a game plan. This is what we've tried. Have at it, right? The front lines isn't going to have that. They're not going to hear that. Your back end leadership, your regionals, your districts, they're going to have more of that conversation. And as the store leaders, you're going to get direction from your district and regionals as to what way you're going to move forward without realizing that they're still trying to figure it out, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of businesses still run like that, even if you're talking about multi-billion-dollar companies. If you think a multi-billion-dollar company has everything down pat as to how they're moving forward, you guys smoke and mirrors a lot of the time because they're still trying to figure it out too, right? And that's where a lot of people don't realize. They just have a larger footprint than most of the people because of the way they position themselves, okay? So being the leader on the front lines, having that clear line of communication of, all right, this is the goal that we're trying to hit. You need to communicate that to your team to be able to achieve that. Now, there's a difference between you as a leader communicating that to your team and the way your team interprets that communication for those goals, right? Because I can sit here and I can be like, hey, Joey, so our goal is going to be to hit 30 new accounts in the next 10 days. Okay, cool. What does that look like, right?
Yeah.
All you're hearing typically is like, you want me to work harder because, right? You're not helping me relate to the goal.
Yeah.
And that's where the difference becomes when you're talking about the frontline salespeople, mid managers, and the rest of the leadership, right? You have to be able to get that kind of flow going where everybody's almost vibing on the same wavelength to ensure that everybody's moving forward and there's synergy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, so on that, man, have you ever been a part of an organization that used to have conference calls on a weekly basis?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed, and you talk about like having a call or whatever the case is, right? But sometimes your communication gets monotonous, right? And those conference calls, They turn into you talking consistently, just delivering the same message. Yeah, this is a checkmark, right? And then so you ask a question and you hear crickets, right?
Yep.
Nobody's wanting to answer, or there's one person that likes to answer. And this is what I figured out, man, because I feel like there were leaders out there on this call that kind of felt bad for that person that nobody was responding. So then it just turned into a conversation between the leader and the leader that wanted to answer. It was like having a two-way conversation because they weren't, I guess they didn't find a way to involve everybody else that was on the call. So I feel like one of the solutions to that was they gave other people the reins of running the call per week, right? So let's say you have 10 managers. Hey, you're going to run the call this week. We're going to talk about what you want to talk about. We're going to talk about what you've noticed through your day in and day out, what's working, what's not working, and share your best practices with the rest of the leaders. And I think that worked out really well. So sometimes the communication doesn't necessarily need to come from yourself. You just need an effective way to communicate different things to different people at different times.
Yep. And you guys have all been on those. They're an hour-long call, right? And then if you're at a district or regional, you have your call right after that. If you're at a regional VP, you have your call right after that. So you're on, you could be on the phone for 2-3 hours before you actually can get any work done on that specific day. And that's typically either a Friday or a Monday, depending on your industry.
Yeah.
Right. It's either how we're going to finish strong or how we're going to start strong. Right. It's one of those two. Never fails. And to your point, Joey, yeah, it definitely works when you have other peers that are on the call giving that message. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not from me. It's now coming from somebody that the majority of the callers can relate to. Right. Yeah. So, and it's the same thing for your salespeople. When it's you as a store manager telling the information, when it's you as a district manager disseminating the information, yes. But now when it's coming from the peer as to like, all right, this is the goal we're going to hit, or this is the goal we're going to need to get after. They typically do a better job, believe it or not, at actually being able to make that more of a personal communication where, hey guys, like the reason we need to hit this is because I am planning on doing X, X, and X once we hit this, because it's going to mean that we have, our commission goals. Our commission is going to be, 2-3 times more. Mm-hmm. And if we really break it down, it doesn't mean we have to do a lot of extra work. We just have to be efficient in what we're doing. So whenever you guys see somebody coming in, make sure you do this, this, and this, right? And then having them help each other. Now, as a leader, that's where it becomes a lot difficult, because obviously it's a one-to-many observation rate, especially on the busier times.
Yeah.
But when you're able to communicate and you have, and it goes back to those videos we've talked about, having that first follower, right? Mm-hmm. You have somebody on the front lines that can help communicate what you've been talking about. Not only do they help get the rest of the team fired up, you now have your future leader there.
Yeah.
Right? Whether they know it or not, whether that's what they're trying to get to or not, you now have a potential future leader that you can pay attention to and try to help mold to be able to grow. Even though you don't want to lose them, we know that secret.
Well, I mean, like you hit the nail on the head there, man. And I think that goes back to our original topic, is that communication really is the groundwork for how you're going to get to that next level. It's about how you're going to be developing let's say you have a person that is that first leader, right? I mean, that's first follower, right?
First follower. Yeah.
So the first follower.
But you weren't wrong. First leader is also the big thing, right?
Yeah. Essentially what they're going to be, because they're going to be able to communicate the things that you want them to do to the people that are around them, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to have more of an influence. And if they can definitely verbalize that to influence the others, then you definitely have the making of a leader.
Oh yeah, big time. And communication, you guys would be surprised at how big communication is to leadership. Like, it is overstated because it's what everybody says, but it's completely misunderstood and misinterpreted in so many different ways. Like everybody's like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell people what we're after. It's like, okay, I mean, you're getting the basics of communication, but you're not getting to the actual heart and meat of it, which is true communication where there's understanding. You're actually conveying the information where people are completely understanding it and grasping the majority. And I say majority because one thing you're going to learn, especially about spoken communication, you're going to retain only so much of it because you have other stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also you don't want to have that communication that uses the buzzwords of the company, right? You don't want to basically be a human version of their mission statement. They want you to know how you're going to relate to the topic at hand and how you're going to be successful in that, or what has made you successful. I think that's really important. Some people think that, you know what, if I can relate to the company, then I can communicate it well. Not necessarily. You know, you have to make sure that you are being genuine in what you have done or what you're going to do. Just like you were saying, you know, Omar, I think that it's important to relate to the people that you're communicating it to, right? I mean, I definitely think you hit the nail on the head there, man, because you have to know your audience and you have to make sure that you're getting the reaction that you want. I talked about this before, you know, like you're a comedian on stage. If you're not getting the reaction that you want, you need to change the topic. You need to try to get something to get the ball rolling, get that momentum going, right? And make sure you take it off that stage with a full crowd of applause, right? That's the end goal. That's where you want them.
Yeah, and guys, if you ever look at your, like, this is kind of on point to the comedian thing, right? I have a couple of friends that are actual stand-up comedians. The thing is that they take years developing their routines, and if you ever wonder why they tour and they do the exact same routine every single time, it's because those are the ones that hit. They've toured for years throwing things and, you know, seeing if these jokes would hit, and they don't, but the ones that do, they retain an actual list of, and they rinse and repeat until they have like a full routine that they can go off of. And that's where 80-90% of the stuff that they say will end up hitting, because it's a tried and true method. It's the same thing with leadership. You're going to try a lot of different things and you're going to stick with the ones that work with you. Because here's the thing, what works for me isn't going to 100% work for Joey. We have two different leadership styles. You're going to have a different leadership style than what we have. And if you're on these calls, if you're on these podcasts listening in, I'm sure you're trying to get better at what your trade is, your craft. And that's where we're all at. It doesn't matter if you're first starting off or if you're at the C-suite. Times change. Different personalities come. Different macroeconomic situations will occur. You have to be able to change and be able to adapt and have a rotating list, essentially, of what works and what doesn't. Okay. Yeah. And that's going to be a huge thing. And you're probably watching this wondering, all right, so does that mean I'm never going to be a leader? No, you're going to be a leader. What I'm saying is leadership evolves. And that's the difference between somebody who is continuously growing with an organization and those that get moved out. You have to learn how to be able to change and adapt to all the different circumstances that are coming. Because what worked 10 years ago, a lot of that stuff isn't necessarily working today in the same way it did.
Yeah, well, you know, like I feel like we're missing one big aspect here, right? So sometimes communication involves talking to a group of people, could be to a group of peers, and we all know that that's actually intimidating if you haven't done it before, right? And especially if it's on a topic that you don't know how to communicate, you're definitely going to be fumbling over the things that you need to land, right? So we know that it's an issue, but know that it is a skill that can be built so that you can become better at communication. The more that you do it, right, the better you're going to be at. So find those things that you're passionate about in your leadership, in your current position, right? Find those things that you can talk about because you do them, like we've talked about before, basically second nature, right? It's just what you do. But you have to be able to like step outside your body for a second, right? Observe yourself and see what you're good at so that you can know what to communicate and how you can influence others to be to basically be along that same path.
Yep. And the dreaded words you don't want to hear is, yes, there's going to be a lot of things you don't do right. And there's a lot of things you do well. Okay. And what I personally found as a leader, and I've said this, personally, it's like intimidating to go up to a mentor, one of my peers, and ask them, hey, what am I missing? Okay. We all talk about like having, the different ways you give feedback. But as a leader, one of the toughest things you can ask somebody is to give you honest feedback. If you have somebody who's like, oh, no, you did good, don't worry about it. They're not being truthful, and that's actually going to hurt you more in the long run than it's going to help you. You want to have that mentor, you want to have that leader or those peers that can tell you, yeah, you did great. These are the areas, or this is the one area that you really missed on, right? And then you can judge if that's really an important aspect, or, if it was maybe like a small thing you can overcome and it's not that big of an issue, right?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to take that constructive feedback and seek it. You're going to give it as a leader. So you know what it feels like when you're the person giving that information. But you also need to put yourself in that situation where you're asking for that feedback so that you can find what you need to improve on. And that's going to be it's honestly gut-wrenching. When you first start to do it, it's so gut-wrenching. It's probably harder than doing public speaking because now you're actively asking for that criticism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I honestly, so it's one of those things I do to myself all the time, and I'm so hard on myself, and I always second guess myself. But, just like I was advising to keep a journal of those things, like also keep a journal of the things that don't work, right? Yeah. Keep like, say, oh, I did this today, and man, like that fell on our face, right? But how did you get back up again? And how did you course correct, right? How did you get back on the right path? And document that as well, right? This is where I failed, but this is how I turn that failure into a success. Because let's be honest, you talk about comedians. I'll be at the spot on every Friday. No, I'm just playing now. You talk about comedians, like how many jokes do you think that they throw away, right? How many skits do you think that they throw away, right? Because not everything, like we were saying, works, right? So you as a leader, not all your communication styles are going to work. Not all your the methods that you take to lead to success are going to work, right? And it's going to fail. Like that's encouraged. Fail so that you know how to succeed going forward.
Yes. Yeah. If the path forward is stumbling, it is failing. You're going to fail more than you succeed, but those successes you have are going to far outweigh any failures you've come across, because the failures you're going to easily rebound from. You can, especially if you're moving fast, you can easily rebound back from that and get back on track to where you're supposed to be at. There's nothing wrong with trying new things, right?
Right.
So I think for you guys watching, probably for today's episode, the biggest ask that we're going to have of you, right, outside of like and subscribe, okay? we definitely like your guys' support, so feel free to comment, like, subscribe. We want to see what you guys are doing and what you guys are thinking. But let us know. Write down, take a couple of days, take a week or so, write down things you're trying to achieve, and keep a journal of what has been working and what hasn't, and share that with us and let us know how that's worked out for you.
Yeah, because I think that's so important, man. And what we're trying to do is share the knowledge so that we can shorten that learning curve for everybody, right? By you doing, you're going to impact somebody else that was where you were 2 months ago, 2 years ago, maybe, right? And you're going to set this light bulb off in their head, and they're going to get to where they're going faster than before because of the way that you communicated what you do.
100% agree. With that, guys, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank y'all for listening, guys.
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.